My aunt unalived my family for my inheritance and sent me to a boarding school to silence me. I took her down and never looked back. 2 years later, she's still sending letters from prison, pleading her innocence. Drake once said, "Never let success get to your head," and my parents lived by that. You see, my entire family is made up of new money millionaires, but my parents always wanted me to grow up humble and not to be one of girls where being rich is like a personality trait. So pretty much all of my clothes were from Goodwill or Marshall's. None of us had any Apple products, and even our dog Lucky was only allowed the off-brand dog food. And at first, I hated them for it, because I'd watch those "I'm not trying to brag" Christmas hauls and wish that I could make one too. Or I'd see girls my age only wearing designer makeup and clothes and envy them with all my heart. It wasn't until I turned 15 that I could really appreciate it. I was sitting in the back of my English class when one of my friends walked in. One of the richest girls in the school turned to her friend and said, "If my parents couldn't afford first-hand clothing, I would actually unalive myself." They both proceeded to thrash around their desks while laughing, as if it was the funniest thing known to mankind. That's when I finally started to be grateful that my parents had raised me right. And I guess my parents noticed me being more humble and modest, because that's when they began to spend a little more money on me. Nothing crazy, just an extra trip or two a year. It was around this time that we planned to hang out with my Aunt Madison. She was basically the opposite of my parents. Always smelled like Chanel perfume, wore solid gold jewelry, drove a pink Tesla. So up until this point, I hadn't seen her much, and she insisted that we go on a boat trip with her together, on a boat she owned. I remember we looked so out of place, because the boat was more like a mini yacht, and my aunt was wearing a Prada swimsuit with Gucci sandals, while me and my parents were wearing secondhand Shein LOL. But at around 4 p.m., the weather took a huge turn, and the driver started to turn the yacht around. I myself was hit with extreme seasickness, so I went below the deck to lie down in the bedroom. When we finally made it to shore, I ran out to laugh with my parents about how funny that was, except I couldn't see them anywhere. My aunt had this look of pity plastered on her face, dabbing her eyes with a cloth while no actual tears came out. They didn't make it. Her voice was dramatic and loud. The color drained from my face. The water got so choppy they fell overboard, and we didn't even realize it until it was too late. I fell to the ground in pain. My aunt waved at someone to carry me to the car, where a chauffeur drove me to her home. Anytime I tried to speak, no words came out. I spent the next few days glued to my mattress. Back then, I trusted that she was doing everything she could to find my parents. And after just 3 days, she did. Their bodies were so disfigured that it barely looked like them anymore. But it was enough to put in the casket and hold a funeral. I was going to wear a black dress my mom got me for my birthday, because it still smelled like her. But when I opened my wardrobe, everything was gone. "You're a wealthy woman, and it's time to start acting like it." Her voice was cold, and she handed me a sequined black ball gown. So the only thing I had left of my parents was our dog, Lucky. Every night I cried, he would plop himself beside me on the bed and sigh. It was like he knew what was going on. He was the only one I felt safe being sad around, because whenever my aunt saw me looking even just a little gloomy, she would hand me a gift, each one more extravagant than the last. The beige Marc Jacobs tote bag, the newest iPhone, AirPod Maxes. It got to the point that she had spent so much money on trying to cheer me up that I felt guilty for ever grieving around her. And that's how Lucky became my lifeline. Every night I'd sit curled up in my huge white silk bed sheets, feeling completely empty, and Lucky would sit in my lap and lick my face until my lips formed some sort of smile. His big brown eyes staring at me and begging me to take him on a walk was the only thing that got me out of bed on the weekends. But I'm a pretty light sleeper, so every night right as I was about to fall asleep, I'd always kick him out of my room and shut the door. It was 12 p.m. on a Saturday when I went looking for him. I had just spent the entire morning doom scrolling and crying my eyes out, but I couldn't find him anywhere. That's when my aunt walked in with a dog carrier. Except inside, it wasn't Lucky. It was a poodle. I put down that ugly stray that was always bothering you. Meet Coco. I swear I thought she was pranking me, but then she opened the dog cage and forced me to pet her. I ran back up to my room without saying a word. I remember staring at all the expensive BS in my room, trying to think of a genuine reason as to why I shouldn't just unalive myself. And that's when I heard my aunt on the phone downstairs. She was talking louder than usual, and I was nosy. So I opened my door quietly to eavesdrop. Of course I had to get rid of them. What they were doing was practically abuse. No girl should ever have to grow up in poverty. My heart dropped. It was all on purpose. Everything. The boat trip, the storm, my parents, even Lucky. All of it orchestrated by the woman who was supposed to be family. I stood frozen at the top of those stairs, my bare feet cold against the marble. The chill seemed to seep through my skin, matching the ice that was forming in my chest. My aunt's voice drifted up, casual and businesslike, like she was discussing a real estate deal instead of unaliving. I forced myself to move, creeping back to my room on shaky legs. Each step felt like it might give me away, the plush carpet that usually muffled sound now seeming to amplify every movement. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely turn the doorknob. Once inside, I locked the door and slid down against it, trying to process what I'd just heard. She unalived them. She actually unalived my parents. And Lucky too, just because he reminded her of them. My brain kept replaying her words over and over. The casual tone, the little laugh she'd given when mentioning the boat. I had to get out of here, but how? I was 16, had no money of my own, and nowhere to go. All our relatives lived across the country, and I didn't even have their numbers. My aunt had taken my old phone the first day, saying it was outdated and embarrassing. I spent the rest of that day pretending to be sick. When she knocked on my door to check on me, I mumbled through the wood that I had a migraine. She left a tray of food outside, some fancy salmon dish that made my stomach turn. The smell of it lingered in the hallway for hours. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents falling into those dark waves. I kept thinking about how scared they must have been. Did they call for me? Did they know what was happening? The silk sheets my aunt had insisted on felt like they were suffocating me. The next morning, my aunt barged into my room without knocking. She was dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my dad made in a month. Her perfume, something French and expensive, made my empty stomach churn. "Get up," she said. "We're going shopping. You need a whole new wardrobe for school." I wanted to scream at her, to throw something, to run, but I knew I had to be smart. If she'd unalived my parents, what would stop her from getting rid of me too? So I nodded and got dressed in one of the designer outfits she'd bought me. We spent the day at high-end boutiques where salespeople knew her by name. They'd flutter around her like moths to a flame, bringing champagne and macarons while I stood there like a mannequin. She'd hold up dresses against me, frowning at each one like it personally offended her. "You have your mother's unfortunate bone structure," she said at one point. "We'll have to work around it." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Over the next few days, I forced myself to play along. I thanked her for the gifts. I wore the clothes. I even pretended to like that stupid poodle, though Coco seemed to hate me as much as I hated her. The dog would bare its teeth whenever I came near, like it could sense my true feelings. But I was always listening, always watching, trying to figure out my next move. My aunt seemed to relax around me once she thought I was settling in. She'd drink wine at dinner, sometimes a whole bottle, and get chatty. She told me about her business ventures, her travels, her many ex-husbands. Never once did she mention my parents except to make snide comments about their lifestyle choices. One evening, about 2 weeks after the boat incident, she got particularly hammered. We were sitting by her infinity pool, the lights of the city twinkling below us like fallen stars. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of her garden's night-blooming jasmine. "You know," she slurred, swirling her wine glass, "I tried to help your mother so many times, offered to set her up with a real career, introduce her to the right people, but no, she wanted to be a teacher." A teacher? Can you imagine? I gripped my glass of sparkling water so tight I thought it might shatter. "She loved teaching," I said quietly. My aunt waved her hand dismissively, her diamond rings catching the light. "Love doesn't pay the bills, darling. She could have had all this." She gestured at her mansion, "But she chose that pathetic man instead." Well, look where that got her. That night, I made my first real plan. I needed to find evidence, proof of what she'd done. Then I could go to the police, or at least threaten her into letting me go. I started small. When she was at her Pilates class or getting her nails done, I'd sneak into her office. It was all modern furniture and abstract art, nothing like my dad's cozy study with its overflowing bookshelves and the smell of old paper. Her computer was password protected, but I found some paper files in her desk. Most of it was financial stuff I didn't understand, but I did find the papers from the boat rental company. The weather report for that day showed calm seas, no storm warnings, nothing. My hands shook as I read the details. My heart was pounding as I took photos with the new iPhone she'd given me. But when I tried to send them to myself, I realized she'd restricted the phone. I could only text and call numbers she'd pre-approved. I kept searching whenever I could. In her bedroom, I found a safe behind a painting, a gaudy abstract piece that probably cost more than my parents' house. In the garage, I discovered she had 3 more cars besides the Tesla. In the pool house, there was a whole room full of designer goods with the tag still on, like she bought things just to own them, but no smoking firearm. Nothing that proved what I knew was true. Then she told me about the boarding school. "It's in Connecticut," she said over breakfast one morning, cutting into her egg white omelet with surgical precision. "Very exclusive. They'll help you process your grief properly, away from all these painful memories." I nearly choked on my organic free-range eggs, but school doesn't start for months. They have a special summer program for students who've experienced trauma. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You leave next week. Connecticut, hundreds of miles from anyone who knew me or my parents. I'd be completely isolated, totally under her control." That night, I tried to run. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close, then grabbed a backpack and stuffed it with whatever cash I could find in her purse. It wasn't much, maybe $200, but it was something. I threw in a water bottle and some granola bars from the kitchen, my hands shaking the whole time. I made it as far as the front gate before the security guard stopped me. He was a large man with kind eyes who'd always nodded politely when I passed. "Miss Madison asked us to make sure you don't leave unaccompanied," he said, not unkindly. "For your safety." My safety. Right. The next morning, my aunt was furious. She didn't yell, that wasn't her style. Instead, she spoke in this calm, icy voice that was somehow worse. "I'm trying to help you," she said. "Your parents left you with nothing. I'm giving you everything. The least you could do is show some gratitude." She hired someone to pack my things for boarding school. I watched as they folded designer clothes I'd never chosen into Louis Vuitton luggage I didn't want. The only thing I managed to hide was a photo of my parents I'd found in my wallet. I tucked it into my bra when no one was looking. The drive to the airport was silent. My aunt typed on her phone the whole time while I stared out the window, trying to memorize the city where my parents had lived and died. The familiar streets looked different from the back of her town car, like I was seeing them through a filter. At the gate, she finally looked at me. Really looked at me. "This is for your own good," she said. "Someday you'll thank me." I wanted to spit in her face. Instead, I nodded and walked onto the plane. The school was exactly what you'd expect for the price tag. Rolling green lawns that looked like they'd been trimmed with nail scissors, ivy-covered buildings that probably housed more secrets than books, students who looked like they'd stepped out of a catalog. My roommate, a girl girl named Brittany from Greenwich with perfectly highlighted hair took one look at my luggage and squealed, "Oh my God, is that the limited edition? My mom's been on the wait list for months." I wanted to tell her she could have it, all of it, but I just smiled and unpacked. The grief counseling my aunt had mentioned turned out to be 1 hour a week with a therapist who spent most of the time checking her phone. Dr. Whitman had dead eyes and a voice like she was perpetually bored. The rest was regular classes, though nothing like my public school back home. Here, kids complained about their trust funds and summer homes like they were real problems, but the worst part was the isolation. My aunt had given the school a list of approved contacts, which was basically just her. I couldn't call my old friends, couldn't email my parents' coworkers. When I tried to use the library computers to reach out, I found social media sites were blocked. I made one friend, sort of. Russell was a scholarship kid from Boston who worked in the dining hall. He had dark hair that always fell in his eyes and a smile that seemed genuine in a place full of fakes. He noticed I always sat alone and started sitting with me during his breaks. He didn't ask why I never talked about my family, and I didn't ask why he sometimes had bruises on his arms. "This place is like a prison with better food," he said one day, making me laugh for the first time in weeks. My aunt called every Sunday at exactly 7 p.m. The conversations were always the same. How was school? Was I making friends? Did I need anything? I gave her the answers she wanted to hear while imagining pushing her off that yacht. The other students started calling me the ghost. I drifted through classes, ate alone, spent my free time in the library reading anything that might help me understand what had happened. Maritime law, inheritance rules, police procedures. The librarian started giving me strange looks, but never said anything. Then came the bullying. It started small. Someone put gum in my hair during assembly. My homework went missing from my backpack. Stupid, petty stuff that felt enormous when you had no one to talk to about it. I suspected Brittany was behind it. She'd gone from excited about my luggage to resentful when she realized I didn't care about any of it. "What's wrong with you?" she asked one night, her voice sharp. "Do you know how lucky you are?" Lucky. That word made me want to scream. Lucky was dead because of my aunt. My parents were dead because of her, and I was trapped in this place because of her. I started writing letters to my old friends, hoping maybe one would get through, but they always came back. Address unknown. Return to sender. My aunt had thought of everything. The worst part was birthdays and holidays. My 17th birthday passed with just a card from my aunt and a cake the dining hall staff felt bad enough to make me. Thanksgiving meant watching other kids get picked up by their families while I stayed on the nearly empty campus. The silence in the dorms was deafening. Russell stayed too. His family couldn't afford the trip home. We ate turkey sandwiches in the empty dining hall and pretended it was a feast. "You ever think about running?" he asked, his voice echoing in the empty space. "Every day. What stops you?" I thought about my aunt's connections, her money, her ability to make my parents disappear. Nowhere to run to. Christmas break was the worst. My aunt insisted I come home, though that mansion had never been home. She'd redecorated my room while I was gone. Everything was white and gold now, like a hotel. Even the smell was different, some expensive candle that made me sneeze. "I thought you'd like it," she said when she saw my face. More sophisticated. She threw a Christmas party and paraded me around like a show pony. "This is my niece," she'd say. "She's at Exeter Academy, top of her class." Lies. I was barely passing, too depressed to care about grades. The guests all cooed over me, telling me how lucky I was to have such a generous aunt. One woman, dripping in diamonds and reeking of wine, actually said, "It's so wonderful how Madison stepped up after that tragic accident." Accident. The word made me dizzy. That night, after everyone left, my aunt got hammered again. We were sitting by the fireplace, that stupid poodle in her lap. The fire crackled and popped, casting shadows on her face that made her look almost demonic. "Your mother never appreciated what I tried to do for her," she said suddenly. I stayed quiet, having learned that she talked more when I didn't respond. I introduced her to Gregory Ashford. "Do you know who that is? His family owns half of Manhattan. He was interested in her, could have given her everything. But no, she chose your father, a public school teacher." She spat the words like they tasted bad. "They were happy," I said softly. She laughed, that same breaking glass sound. "Happy doesn't pay for medical bills. Happy doesn't buy you a future." I tried to make her see that, but she was too stubborn, just like her daughter. My hands clenched in my lap. "What do you mean?" "Oh, don't play dumb. I see how you look at me, like I'm some kind of monster for trying to give you a better life. You're just like her, too proud to accept help. Is that why you unalived them?" The words hung in the air between us. My aunt went very still, her eyes narrowing. The fire seemed to dim. "What did you say?" My heart was hammering, but I couldn't take it back now. "I heard you, on the phone. You said you had to get rid of them." She set down her wine glass carefully, too carefully. "You must have misunderstood, darling. You were grieving, not thinking clearly." "I know what I heard." She stood up, swaying slightly. The poodle yapped as it hit the floor. "You know what? I think you need to go back to school early. This environment isn't good for you." I was on a plane back to Connecticut the next morning. The second semester was worse. My aunt must have called the school because suddenly I had a mentor assigned to me. Mrs. Davidson, a woman who smelled like mothballs and disappointment, followed me everywhere. She sat in on my classes, ate lunch at my table, even waited outside the bathroom. "It's for your own well-being," she said when I protested, her smile never reaching her eyes. Russell couldn't sit with me anymore. My roommate requested a transfer. Even the teachers looked at me with pity and suspicion, like I might snap at any moment. I started planning again. This time, I'd be smarter. I saved every penny I could find, hiding it in a tampon box under my bed. I memorized the bus schedules. I researched homeless shelters in nearby cities. But then spring break came, and my aunt had a new surprise. "We're going to Europe," she announced when she picked me up. up. Paris, Milan, Barcelona, just us girls. I wanted to refuse, but Mrs. Davidson was standing right there, smiling her fake smile. How wonderful, she said. Such a generous aunt. The trip was a nightmare of museums and restaurants where my aunt criticized everything from my posture to my pronunciation of French words. She bought me more clothes I didn't want, jewelry I'd never wear, experiences that felt like prison sentences. In Paris, standing on the Eiffel Tower, she took my phone to get a photo. Smile, she commanded. You'll want to remember this. But all I could think about was jumping. When we got back to school, I found out Russell had been fired. No one would tell me why. I saw him once more, cleaning out his locker in the staff area. He pressed a piece of paper into my hand before security escorted him out. It was a phone number, nothing else. I hid it in the lining of my shoe and waited. The opportunity came 3 weeks later. Mrs. Davidson had food poisoning, probably from the cafeteria sushi she insisted on eating. While she was throwing up in the nurse's office, I slipped out and found a payphone in town. The number Russell gave me belonged to his sister in Boston. He said you might call, she said. Said you needed help. I almost cried at the kindness in her voice. I can't talk long, I said, but I need to get out of here. My aunt, she unalived my parents, and now she has me trapped at this school. There was a pause. Russell mentioned something like that. Look, I can't promise much, but if you can get to Boston, you can crash here for a bit. Figure out your next move. It was the first hope I'd had in months, but when I got back to campus, my aunt was waiting in the headmaster's office. Skipping your mentor session? She tisked. That's not like you. I was confined to campus for the rest of the semester. No town privileges, no phone calls except the Sunday check-ins. Mrs. Davidson was replaced by Mr. Garrett, an ex-military guy who took his job way too seriously. Summer came again. Another break at the mansion. Another round of parties and shopping and pretending everything was fine. But I was done pretending. I'd turned 18 in May, though my aunt seemed to have forgotten. That meant I was legally an adult. I could leave if I wanted to. The only thing stopping me was money, and the fear of what she might do if I tried. Then I overheard another phone call. She was in her office, door cracked open, voice carrying down the hall. The trust fund? Yes. I'm aware it becomes accessible when she turns 21. That's still 3 years away. No, she doesn't know about it. Her parents never told her, and I certainly won't. 10 million? Is that all? I thought they'd saved more. Well, it'll have to do. By then, she'll be properly grateful for everything I've done. $10 million. My parents had left me $10 million, and my aunt was keeping it from me. I crept back to my room, mind racing. That money changed everything, but I still had to survive 3 more years, unless I didn't. That night at dinner, I put on the performance of my life. I apologized for being difficult, thanked her for everything she'd done, even complimented that stupid poodle. My aunt was suspicious at first, but I kept it up for days, weeks. By the end of summer, she actually seemed to believe I'd finally come around. I knew you'd see sense eventually, she said, patting my hand with her cold fingers. Your mother was the same way, stubborn at first, but she always came around in the end. I wanted to ask what she meant by that, but I bit my tongue. I was playing a long game now. Senior year started better. My aunt had called off the watchdogs, convinced I was finally adjusting. I still couldn't contact my old friends, but at least I could go to the bathroom alone. I threw myself into college applications, knowing it was my best chance at freedom. My aunt wanted me to go to her alma mater, some fancy private school in Vermont, but I applied everywhere I could, using the school computers when she wasn't monitoring my activity. Then came Thanksgiving, and everything changed again. I was back at the mansion for Thanksgiving break, and my aunt was hosting another one of her dinner parties. The usual crowd of rich people pretending their lives had meaning. I was wearing another designer dress I hated, making small talk with people whose names I'd forget by dessert. That's when I noticed something different about my aunt's behavior. She kept checking her phone, stepping out to take calls. Her lawyer, Gregory something, showed up halfway through dinner, which was weird even for her. After everyone left, she cornered me in the kitchen while I was loading the dishwasher. She'd had more wine than usual, and her words were slightly slurred. I need you to sign some papers, she said, sliding a folder across the marble counter. Just routine stuff for your trust fund. I froze. She'd never mentioned the trust fund before. I pretended to read through the documents, but the legal language made my head spin. From what I could understand, it was giving her extended control over my inheritance. What is this exactly? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Nothing important, just making sure everything's properly managed until you're ready. She watched me with those cold eyes. Sign here. I signed. What choice did I have? But I made sure to take pictures of every page when she went to refill her wine glass. Back at school, I showed the photos to anyone who would look. Most kids shrugged it off, but this one girl, Julia, her dad was a lawyer. She squinted at my phone screen during study hall. This is sketchy, she whispered. Like really sketchy. She's basically trying to lock down your money past when you turn 21. My heart sank. Of course she was. Christmas break was when things really started falling apart. My aunt was acting paranoid, installing new security cameras everywhere. She hired more staff to watch me. Even that stupid poodle seemed to be spying on me, following me from room to room. One night, I couldn't sleep and went down for water. My aunt was in her office, door closed, but I could hear her clearly. No, the boat captain won't be a problem. I paid him enough to disappear. The crew members? They barely spoke English. They're probably back in their countries by now. The girl? She's completely under control. Weak, just like her mother. I stood there in my pajamas, shaking. She was talking about my parents unaliving like it was a business transaction. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. If she becomes too much trouble, we can always arrange another accident. Boarding school students OD all the time. Tragic, but not suspicious. I ran back to my room and threw up in the designer wastebasket. She was planning planning to unalive me too if I didn't play along. The next morning, I acted like nothing happened, smiled at breakfast, complimented her new bracelet. But inside, I was screaming. I had to find evidence, real evidence, something that would stick. That's when I remembered our old house, my parents' house. My aunt had mentioned selling it, but maybe she hadn't yet. Maybe there was something there that could help me. I convinced her to let me visit it one last time, told her I needed closure before going to college. She actually bought it, probably because I'd been such a good little puppet lately. The house looked exactly the same from the outside. Same blue shutters my dad painted every summer. Same garden where my mom grew tomatoes. But inside, everything was covered in sheets, like ghosts of my former life. My aunt waited in the car while I went in, giving me 20 minutes. "Don't dawdle," she said, checking her phone. I ran straight to my dad's study. Most of his stuff was gone, but I knew his hiding spots. Behind the loose baseboard, I found it. An old phone, the kind with actual buttons. The battery was dead, but I shoved it in my pocket anyway. In my parents' bedroom, I found something else. A letter, tucked inside my mom's jewelry box. It was addressed to me, dated just a week before they died. "Our dearest daughter," it read. "If you're reading this, something has happened to us. We've set aside money for your future, but more importantly, we want you to know the truth about Aunt Madison." I heard the car horn. My time was up. I stuffed the letter in my bra and ran. Back at the mansion, I locked myself in the bathroom and read the rest. My parents had known Madison was dangerous. They'd been documenting her threats, her attempts to control their lives. They'd hidden evidence in a safety deposit box, giving me the location and key number. The key. Where was the key? I spent the next 3 days tearing through everything I owned, pretending to pack for school. Finally, I found it in the lining of my old wallet, the one my aunt had tried to throw away. My mom must have sewn it in there, but how could I get to the bank without my aunt knowing? The answer came from an unexpected source. Coco, that horrible poodle, got sick, like really sick, throwing up everywhere, shaking. My aunt freaked out and rushed her to the emergency vet. While she was gone, I called an Uber with the cash I'd hidden. The driver, an older woman named Betty, didn't ask why I looked so scared. The bank was 20 minutes away. I had maybe an hour before my aunt noticed I was gone. The safety deposit box was small, but what was inside changed everything. Photos of the boat from different angles, showing clear skies, weather reports my parents had printed, recordings on an old device I didn't recognize, and a will, notarized and witnessed, stating clearly that if anything happened to them, I should go to my godparents in Oregon, not Madison. I took photos of everything with my phone, then grabbed the physical evidence. On my way out, I asked the bank manager to make copies of everything and seal them in a new box only I could access. The Uber driver was still waiting. "You okay, honey?" Betty asked, seeing my face. "I need to go to the police station," I said. But when we got there, I saw my aunt's Tesla in the parking lot. She'd figured out where I'd gone. "Drive," I told Betty. "Please, just drive." We ended up at a McDonald's 3 towns over. I was crying, shaking, trying to figure out what to do. Betty bought me a coffee and sat with me. "You want to talk about it?" she asked gently. So I told her everything. The boat, the unalivings, the evidence. She listened without interrupting, her face getting paler with each detail. "My son's a detective in Boston," she said finally. "Different jurisdiction. Your aunt won't have connections there." She called him right there in the McDonald's. Within an hour, I was in a police station telling my story again, this time to people who actually listened. The investigation moved fast after that. The evidence from the safety deposit box was damning. The weather reports alone proved my aunt had lied about the storm. The recordings were my parents discussing their fears about Madison, dated just days before their death. They arrested her at the mansion. I wasn't there, but I heard she tried to blame everything on the boat captain, then the crew members, then claimed my parents had been sewers lidle. Each lie made things worse for her. Her fancy lawyer was good though, really good. He got her out on bail, convinced the judge she wasn't a flight risk. The trial would take months, maybe years. I couldn't go back to the mansion or the boarding school, but my godparents in Oregon, Frank and Catherine, welcomed me immediately. They'd been trying to find me since my parents died, but my aunt had told them I didn't want contact. "We never believed her," Catherine said, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. "Your mother would never have wanted you with Madison. Living with them was like breathing again. Their house smelled like coffee and books, just like home. They had 3 kids of their own, all younger than me, who immediately adopted me as their big sister. But the best part? They had lucky. My aunt hadn't put him down. She'd sold him to a pet store, and by pure coincidence, Frank had bought him for the kids just a month later. He recognized me immediately, nearly knocking me over with his enthusiasm. "We couldn't believe it when we saw him," Frank explained. "He had your family's address on his chip. We tried to contact you, but Madison, always Madison, controlling everything." The trial was a circus. My aunt showed up in designer suits, playing the grieving sister, but the evidence was overwhelming. The boat captain eventually testified in exchange for a lighter sentence. He admitted she'd paid him to take them to a specific spot where the currents were dangerous, to turn off the emergency equipment, to lie about the weather. She still didn't get convicted of unaliving. Her lawyer argued it down to manslaughter, claimed she only meant to scare them, but she got 15 years, plus fraud charges for trying to steal my inheritance. Turns out my parents were smarter than anyone knew. They'd set up the trust so that if anything happened to them before I turned 21, and Madison was my guardian, she could only access a small monthly amount for my care. The rest was locked away. That's why she needed me to sign those papers. I started college in Oregon, close to my godparents. Nothing fancy, just a state school where I could study education like my mom. I wear regular clothes now, shop at Target, eat cafeteria food. It feels like home. Russell reached out through social media once everything hit the news. He'd been fired for asking too many questions about me. We still talk sometimes. He's doing better, working at a restaurant in Boston, saving for culinary school. Julia from boarding school messaged me too, said her dad would have helped pro bono if I'd needed it. It's nice knowing not everyone from that place was awful. I still have nightmares sometimes, still flinch when I smell Chanel perfume, but Lucky sleeps on my bed every night, and my godparents never complain about his fur on the furniture. The money's still there, waiting for me to turn 21. $10 million. Sometimes I think about what I'll do with it. Maybe start a scholarship fund for kids who need to escape bad situations. Maybe donate it all. I don't know yet. What I do know is that my parents were right. Money doesn't make you happy. Family does. Real family. Not the kind that tries to unalive you for your inheritance. My aunt sends letters from prison sometimes. I don't read them. Frank burns them in the fireplace while Catherine makes hot chocolate and the kids argue over movie choices. It's not the life my parents planned for me, but I think they'd be proud anyway. I'm in college. I have people who love me, and Lucky still gets off-brand dog food because, honestly, he doesn't know the difference. Some nights I look at their photo, the one I hid in my bra that day, and tell them about my day, about my classes, my friends, the boy in my statistics class who makes terrible math jokes, normal stuff, the kind of stuff we should have been talking about over dinner. I know they can't hear me, but it helps anyway. And that's the whole story. My aunt's in prison, I'm safe with my godparents, and Lucky's currently snoring on my lap while I type this. Life's weird sometimes, but at least I'm alive to see it get better. Oh, and Coco? The poodle survived whatever made her sick. She lives with one of my aunt's rich friends now. I hope she's miserable, but that's probably just me being petty. Thanks for reading, Reddit. Feels good to finally tell someone the whole truth.